If you've been fishing for a long time, you know how effective a jerkbait is at catching bass in cold water. It will catch them in some of the coldest water temps that you see throughout the year. But to me, there are really 5 big things that I've learned about cold water jerkbait fishing that I think can help you to catch even more fish and even bigger fish. Starting with number 1, you do not need to fish a cold water jerkbait as slow as you might think. I know that for me, growing up, reading Bassmaster magazines, FLW magazines, watching Bassmaster television, every time someone got on a jerkbait bite in cold water, they would tell you to do the same thing. They would say, cast that bait out there, reel it down to depth, pop it a few times, and then let it sit for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, for a long time. And that really means that a single cast can take you like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, even longer at times. Now, I will definitely say that there is a time and a place where pausing it will absolutely get you a lot of bites. I was just fishing Lake Erie last year where I was pausing it, but those fish would come up and hit that bait about 2 seconds into the pause. And for me, I've actually never seen a time where the bass hit it pretty much over about 5 to 7 seconds. So when I go out there and I'm fishing a jerkbait in cold water, I only pause it for about 5 to seconds at most, and that's really just to start. A lot of times I will find that the bass don't even hit it on the pause. This is actually another big thing to really pay attention to in cold water. Sometimes you'll go to jerk that bait and that's when the fish actually eats it. And what I've seen over the last couple of years is that sometimes you don't even have to pause it hardly at all. I was fishing with Hunter Shryock last winter, and we were fishing in some of the coldest conditions that he has seen down there in kind of that Tennessee, Alabama area where the water temp was 41 degrees. We were fishing post frontal. Like, everything would tell you to fish a jerkbait very, very slow. Very slow. And as a matter of fact, what we found over the course of that day is that the faster that you work the jerkbait, not absolutely snatching it really hard, but the faster you worked it, pausing it for not that long, you actually got more bites, even in that really, really cold water temp. So if you think about bass fishing, you know, one of the best things that we can do is simply be efficient out on the water. And if one angler is spending 5 to 10 minutes on a single cast and another angler is able to get 20 or 30 casts in that same 10-minute time frame, that other angler, as long as he's like not fishing the bait too fast, will absolutely catch more fish over the course of the day than the angler that is spending a lot of time with that bait in the water, pausing it when it doesn't need to be paused. Now, again, let's make this sure that this is clear. There are times where a short pause is what you need to catch fish, but sometimes you don't need it. And if you don't need it, the faster and more efficient you can fish that jerkbait, the more fish you're going to catch over the course of the day, and the more opportunities that you will have to catch a bigger fish on the bait. Now, with all that being said, let's actually talk about when that bait does need to be paused. This actually brings me to tip number 2. Now, real quick, before we get into the rest of the jerkbait tips, I have to tell you guys about what I thought was honestly a scam when it comes to the bass fishing industry. We all know how important electronics are in bass fishing, whether you're using forward-facing sonar or even just your traditional down scan and side scan. And over the last couple of years, you've seen a lot of different professional anglers talk about these wire harnesses or these power harnesses that supposedly help you see your graphs a lot clearer, help you to pick up on every little detail. And to be honest with you, I thought it was a scam because a lot of these companies are selling these wire harnesses for $400, $500, and you have to install them, which I think is just kind of a crazy deal if I'm being 100% honest with you. But after talking to the guys over at Boat Things, they said, no, this is actually something that's pretty legit. They will really make your graphs a lot cleaner. So they actually installed one in my boat, and I can tell you right off the bat, there was a instant and huge difference in the clarity that I was getting within my electronics. So I talked to Boat Things, and they basically said, you know what, we'll do a deal for anyone who you send to us. So basically, if you guys live in Ohio or maybe even the surrounding states, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and you want to have one of these wire harnesses installed in your boat, you can have everything, a custom wire harness put in your boat for $450 installed. which is actually a really good deal because everyone else is selling them for the same price, not installed, where you have to spend hours doing it yourself. Now, these wire harnesses come, like I said, they're custom. They have waterproof connections, on and off switches, fuses, everything that you need for your boat. So I'm going to leave a link down below in the description for Boat Things. Give them a call. Let them know that Tyler or Bass Fishing HQ sent you, and you can get a sweet deal on a wire harness that will really help you to see clearly with your electronics. Now, back to the tips. When you're out there and you're fishing this bait and you have to pause it to get the fish to bite it, I will say that I feel like I get more bites with a jerkbait that is slowly sinking versus one that may be perfectly or almost perfectly suspending in the water column. And even at times I've seen baits that slowly rise will get more bites than the ones that suspend in the water column. Again, that kind of goes against what you hear a lot throughout the years, that you need a bait that's perfectly suspends. Now, one of the biggest things that you can do as an angler when it comes to fishing this bait is just make sure that you are in tune with what your jerkbait is doing. Whether you are fishing from the bank or if you're in a $100,000 bass boat fishing with the nicest electronics, you want to make sure that you know whether that bait is slowly falling in the water column or rising in the water column, because typically you will see the bass in cold water want one of those two actions. Now, one of the biggest things that's going to impact whether that bait falls in the water column or rises in the water column is the hooks that you put on it. Now, most jerk baits out there on the market don't come with the best quality hooks on them. And so a lot of us anglers will go out there and change those hooks out, which I absolutely recommend. The thing about that is that depending on what hooks you put in it, it's going to impact, again, whether that bait slowly sinks in the water column or slowly rises in the water column. And I can remember a number of years ago, I was fishing with a Vision 110, the jerkbait that we all know, we all love, we all have caught fish on. And I actually put some bigger hooks on that bait just because the ones that were on it were dull. And it actually made that bait slowly sink in the water column. And I was catching a lot of fish on that slow sink. Well, I ended up losing that fish to a stupid muskie. Sorry, muskie fishermen, you're not going to love that. But I lost it to a muskie, and I ended up putting on a brand new bait, and I stopped catching fish. And I thought for a moment, like, man, that other jerkbait must have had a different color. Like, it was a lot more beat up, even though it was the same like color. There was something different about that bait that was getting more bites. And then I realized, oh yeah, I had changed the hooks out on that bait. I made the switch, I put on a little bit bigger hooks, it caused that bait to sink in the water column, and I immediately started getting bites again. This is when I really realized just how important either that slow sink or that slow rise in the water column is when you're fishing in cold water. So when it comes to fishing a jerkbait, just be in tune with your bait. Understand what it is doing in the water column so that you can adjust. Now, another huge thing, and again, some of these things are super detailed. I understand it. I like to simplify bass fishing if I can, but let's be honest, sometimes these little minute details really make a big difference. And one of the things that I've realized over the last couple of years is that when you are fishing a jerkbait really slow versus very fast, your line diameter does the complete opposite thing. And what I mean by that, and this is tip number 3 if you didn't pick up, is that if you are fishing a jerkbait pretty fast, we'll say we're fishing during the summertime and you're fishing a jerkbait pretty fast in the water column, you're really aggressively snatching that thing, bringing that thing, fast through the water column. If you go with a heavier pound test, let's say you go with 15-pound test versus a 10-pound test, that 15-pound test has a little bit more drag in the water column, which actually is going to cause lift. It's going to bring that bait higher in the water column when you are fishing it fast. Now, if you start fishing that same exact setup in the winter and you're fishing it really slow, it's going to impact your jerkbait in the exact opposite manner. And what I mean by that is if you're using 15-pound test in the winter and you are fishing that jerkbait really slow, it allows that line time to sink in the water column. So the drag of that line doesn't really impact the bait, but that line actually sinking in the water column on a long cast will bring that jerkbait down further in the water column. And so again, I know it's kind of detailed, but the differences between working a jerkbait fast and slow in your line diameter actually does make a difference. So the thing about it is you can use that to your advantage. If you want to get a jerkbait a lot deeper in the water column, sometimes stepping up to, like I said, 15-pound test will help you. If you want to keep it kind of higher in the water column in the winter while also working that bait really slow, go to the 10-pound test. These are all little things that can make a huge difference in your jerkbait fishing during cold water. Now let's talk about jerkbait tip number 4 in cold water. This is something that is very important to remember. And the thing about it is that in cold water, a bass's strike zone typically shrinks a lot. Something that we love about a jerkbait is that it has drawing power. So therefore, in the summertime, you can fish this jerkbait. You can fish it where the bass may come 10 or 15 foot to hit that bait. But in the winter, a lot of bass do not like to travel that distance to get to the bait. So what that does to me a lot of times is it impacts the actual diving depth of the jerkbait that I'm using. Because say for example, in the wintertime, I am fishing, maybe it's a hump or it's a little bit of a lip that's in 12 foot of water and it drops into like 30 or 40 foot of water. And those fish are sitting right on that break in about 12 foot of water. Now, if I were to fish a standard jerkbait, most of those are gonna dive about 5 to 6 foot deep. But in the winter, I don't always see bass that wanna come 5 or 6 foot up in the water column to eat your bait. In the summertime, no problem. They'll come even further distances than that. In the wintertime, it changes it up. So sometimes I have to go with a jerkbait that actually has a little bit bigger bill on it. You know, this is a Berkley 112+1. This gets about 6 to 9 foot. They have a +2 version that gets, 10 to 12 foot. So sometimes when I'm out there fishing a jerkbait, I really have to pay attention to what column those bass are sitting in, what water column they're in. And so that way I can present a bait as close to them as possible. I see that being a really, really big deal because those fish sometimes they don't come up to get it at a distance. Now, with that being said, I will say that another huge misconception, this is actually tip number 5 when it comes to fishing a cold water jerkbait. And this is not just for jerkbait fishing, this is pretty much cold water fishing in general, is that bass are not always as deep as you might think that they are in cold water. I know that for years, I've always thought, hey, in the summertime, bass are pretty deep. In the wintertime, bass are pretty deep. But recently, like I said, I got to fish with Hunter Shyrock. We were fishing in like 6 foot of water, catching fish on a jerkbait in 41-degree water temps. And instead of me just telling you about what happened, I want to show you what happened. And so guys, if you actually click on this video, you'll actually be able to see this exact day that happened to us out on the water where he really, really caught them well. It was a really cool deal. And I'm telling you, it will help you to learn how to find fish so much better. Guys, hope you enjoyed these jerkbait tips and I will see you in the next one.